She can't put together a decent grilled burger, but she can whip up 5-course gourmet meals. She also has an incredible gift to unite strategically driven ideas with forward-thinking themes. Lisa founded FutureThink in 2003 in order to provide a simple approach to the potentially complicated topic of innovation. Today, FutureThink is the largest source of innovation research, tools, and training curricula in the world. This extraordinary futurist has also authored Kill the Company, End the Status Quo, Start an Innovation Revolution. Prepare to meet an innovation leader and futurist, Lisa Bodell.
Thank you. How is everybody? Good? Are you ready to be inspired? Okay, let's go through about 400 PowerPoint slides. Does that sound good? So I'm very pleased to be here. It's my first time in Johannesburg. And I have to say, I'm very humbled and very inspired to be here. I had the pleasure of being with many of the executives from Accenture last night, and we had a great conversation. And I was saying how I had seen many great people, many great places, and that there are many great things happening here. And I talked a lot with the Accenture team, and what was very apparent is we said, there's huge opportunity here, but there's also incredible problems to be solved. And clearly, you all as leaders know this, and we can look at things as a glass half full or a glass half empty. Your job as leaders is to solve these big problems and to help not just you, but your organizations and your people reach their potential. And I want to talk today about simple ways we can create change to do that. Does that sound good? Okay, good. So I want to talk to you about a story of change. And I'll start with my own personal story. And when I got out of university about 30 years ago, I wanted to just light the world on fire. I wanted to create great change. So I did something very obvious. I went into advertising. And it was a really good experience for me. I think every experience we have is there for a reason. And the experience I had when I was in advertising is I'm always a very creative thinker, but I'm very strategic as well. So advertising was perfect because I could be in a creative environment, but do really strategic things. And I was very good with coming up with business ideas. Very good business ideas. I could turn all the things that they had done in terms of 30-second TV commercials or print ads into real business propositions. And for that, my clients loved me. They loved me. But back at the agency, my creative teams dismissed me. Now, don't get me wrong, they were my friends. I went to their birthday parties and their kids' baby showers and now their retirement parties. We're very good friends. But they made it very clear back at the agency that if you didn't work in a specific department, if you weren't part of the creative group, ideas were not your job. And I thought, that's ridiculous. How can you work in a company and want to realize your potential, but only certain people are allowed to have good ideas? So I left, and I started my own company. And eventually it became FutureThink, which is about 17 years ago when I did this. And my goal was to let everybody know, give them the tools and the training, that everyone could be innovative. They just needed to know how. I wanted everybody at every function and every role in an organization to be able to realize their potential and come up with great ideas. And wouldn't you know it, I created a team, and their job around the world is to help leaders like you anticipate and activate change. They're incredible people, too. The people on my team they're TED speakers, they're inventors, they're authors, they're performers. They're very big thinkers. But what's interesting is the job that we set out to do, we didn't realize it would be as hard as we thought. And we started realizing about 5 years ago, when the pace of technology was just really picking up and the pace of change was just accelerating. All my trainers were coming back to me and they were telling me the exact same story. The very people, the very clients, the very leaders that were bringing us in to help teach change at organizations were the very people that were holding us back from doing it when we got there. So we were being brought in to teach people to create change and draw a picture of the future. It was like we were given a box of crayons to create a really cool picture of the future. But then when we got there, the leaders would tell us to only color within the lines, which is ridiculous. And we said, why is this? Why are so many people resisting change? And that's where the background for my book, Kill the Company, came from. I wanted to know, why do people resist it? Why is it such a challenge? And so we talked to tens of thousands of people. I'll probably speak to 100,000 people a year. And what we found was something very interesting, and it's not what you expect about change. The very things that many of you in your organizations put in place to help you better innovate. So these will be governing policies, reports, procedures. These are the things that don't help you innovate, but often they put a chokehold on it. In fact, those are things that you have to have, of course, but they can't be the only thing that you do, and often they become an excuse for not doing anything at all. My feeling is when you want to talk about innovation, sometimes it's not about doing more, it's about doing less. And often it's about stopping doing things or killing and getting rid of them to create the space for change first. People are overwhelmed. If you want your people to activate on change, you need to give them simple things to do, and you need to get rid of first. And I'm going to teach you some of those simple things to do right now. So my goal today is two things. The first is I want you to be inspired. I want you to learn new things that are happening that you can take back and do right away. And the second thing is, and probably the most important, is I want to make you feel very uncomfortable. I want you to feel uncomfortable. Your job as a leader is not to be the best at what you do. Your job is to be the only one that does what you do. And the only way that you can do that is to do uncommon things, uncomfortable things, experiences no one else has. And quite frankly, it's to question your assumptions that may have outlived their time. We don't do it enough, and we don't realize the biases we have that hold us back from change. Now let me ask everybody here, how many people here, by show of hands, think that they are good with change? Raise your hands. Okay, probably about 50%. Well, I think one of the things that holds you back that you don't realize is a mindset for change, and I want to talk about that quickly. So this slide here, this is my children. I have two kids. Jack is 12 and Lindsay is 8, and they're great. They're just great. And one of the things I want to do with my children is I want to give them one of the best stamped passports they can have. I think it is particularly important for you to get out and see the world. And if you can do it, you should. And so a few years ago, I started taking my son on trips with me. And he's a huge football fan, for us, soccer, and he loves Barca. He's a huge Messi fan. And I had an opportunity to go with Merck Pharmaceuticals. There was a project I was doing. And I had an opportunity to go to Madrid and Barcelona. So of course, I said to Jack, do you want to come with me? And he said, of course. So it was fantastic, but it was one of these moments where, you know, as a parent, where something all of a sudden hits you and you realize, whoa, this is significant. We were in Barcelona, and it had been a week, and my son had seen lots of new things, tried lots of new things, done a lot of cultural experience, heard people speaking a lot of different languages, and at one point he saw somebody, and I can't remember specifically what it was, but he pulled me down, and he said, Mom, look at that. That's really weird. And I said, Jack, why is that weird? And he said, because that's not how we do it. And I was very caught off guard by this. I said, what do you mean that's not how we do it? And I said, Jack, you realize when people see you do things, they think you're weird. And he looked at me and he thought about it for a moment and he said, no, right? They just couldn't believe that would be true. And I said, Jack, if you're going to travel with Mom, you can't use the word weird. You have to use the word different. And I know that sounds silly, but it's a very interesting point about mindset. The next time we traveled, it was very simple. We went to London, and he would see something new, and he'd say, Mom, that's different. And I will tell you, his whole perspective changed, and I want you to think about this as leaders. When your team brings you something new, do you react to it as weird or different? The signals you send and the lexicon that you use with your team is very important. If you think it's weird, it sets up a construct of right or wrong. You are resisting change. But if you think of it as different, you're open to possibilities. So today, I want you to look at things and imagine that they're different. So let's actually do something different. I want to play a futurist game with you. Now, my background is that I'm a trained futurist. A futurist is it's a bachelor's and master's of science that you can get. Many of the people on my staff teach foresight and futuring at the University of Houston and around the world. And futurists are people that help business leaders like yourself come up with possible, probable, and preferable scenarios for change. Possible, probable, preferable. Now, what's interesting about that is something can be possible, but it might not be preferable. And that's interesting to take note of. So what we do is we actually teach people how to identify signals of change. There's ways that you can identify change early on. And we play a game with people to get their antenna up called In the News. And I'm going to play it with you now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you some headlines from the future. Things that are signals of change that are happening in the market right now. And I want you to determine whether the headline I read is true or false. Now, here's how we're going to play. If you think the headline I read, and I'll explain it when I do, is true, I want you to stand up out of your chairs and raise your hands like this. If you think it's false, I want you to stay seated with your arms crossed and just look extremely angry, okay? So, get ready. I would put your notebooks down. I'm going to read a headline, and you're going to cast your vote. Okay, here's the first one. Is everybody ready? Here we go. Okay. In a pilot currently in Shanghai, HSBC is doing something very different. They are actually experimenting with getting rid of a subset of their private bank, their premier wealth managers, getting rid of them, and instead putting in big data analysts. The reason for this is, yes, the personal touch is important, but performance and being quick about time is more important. So having people that are just big data analysts on staff that are constantly looking in real time at data, coupled with the client's risk portfolio, they believe will get them better returns and give them a competitive advantage in the market. If you think that they are doing this at HSBC in Shanghai, stand up and give me your hands. Stand up. Oh, you guys are confident, aren't you? Stay standing. No, I want to make you look ridiculous for as long as possible. No, people, you guys, you are my visionaries. I love you guys. Now, people seated, look at these people, right? Because these are my risk takers, right? These people are wrong, so sit down. Come on. Never start with a true. All right, but why did you stand up? Should be true, right? It's possible, it's probable, it's preferable, and in fact, in many places, these things are already happening. DBS in Singapore, as we know, is already using IBM Watson's, their engagement advisor. Many of you are familiar with this, their artificial intelligence agent. Now, what this does is their hope is by using this with their wealth advisors, not in place of, they can give better recommendations based on being able to analyze, like machine learning, massive amounts of data and give better returns for their clients. We're already seeing these things happening in place. In fact, there's an equity investment firm in Hong Kong that has already elected a software program to their board of directors to have voting rights on certain acquisition issues. Now, it goes beyond just artificial intelligence. And this is something, obviously, we're going to see more and more and more of. We can't comprehend, and we certainly can't process as humans the amount of data that's out there. Having an engine that can help us do that can give us a competitive advantage. And it goes further. What about with sensors? Certainly in cars. Cars are a new frontier as well. What about, here's a BMW called Nigel, made in conjunction with USC, University of Southern California, that has over 1,000 sensors in it. Why do you care? Cars won't be about cars in the future, as many of the people here in the automotive industry know. What will they be? They can become many different things. In this instance, a car with 1,000 sensors all of a sudden can detect your behavior. And with data, it's not about actually analyzing your data. It's about being predictive and prescriptive about what you should be doing because it's supposed to be smarter than you. It knows what you're going to do next. So when you get into this car, for example, and there's 1,000 sensors, it can do very simple things like when you sit down in the seat, it can tell you whether you have lost or gained weight since the last time you drove it, and call your therapist accordingly. Put your hands on the steering wheel, basic diagnostics. It can tell you whether your heart rate goes up more when you pull into your driveway at home versus your parking spot at work. Or with filters through, obviously, the venting system, it can tell if you're going into more polluted areas, and the GPS can reroute you to a healthier route. So maybe cars in the future, they're not just about getting you somewhere, maybe they're about health. And this is always one of those conversations people think is ridiculous until I do a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies. And inevitably, we're sitting in a room with the executives, and the executives say, what else can we do with the medication beyond the pill? Well, where do most people spend their time? In their car. wow, wouldn't it be interesting if people could actually take their pharmaceuticals while driving? Ha ha ha, that'll never, until it does. And in the future, in 10 years, your car isn't brought to you by a BMW, but it's brought in conjunction with Pfizer. And that's where these things go. So what does this mean in terms of change? I want you to think about anticipative and predictive. How in the future is behavior technology, predictive artificial intelligence technology going to change what you do or supplement to make you better? Okay. I feel bad for the people that stood up, so I'm going to give you another try. Is that okay? Let's do another one. This is a simple one. So, Boehringer Ingelheim, a pharmaceutical company in Wiesbaden and Mainz in Germany. We do a lot of work with them. They were having an issue that some of you might be familiar with, where they have very siloed thinking. People don't necessarily talk to each other across groups. And a very rogue person in the marketing department decided he wanted to do something about this. And he started a kind of an applet that turned into something they put on their intranet. And he called it lunch roulette. Take a gamble. And basically what happens is this. You enter in your location, the role or function that you have in the company, and the date and time that you would be available for lunch. And then they would match you up. It's like dating for business. They would match you up with somebody that was in a completely different department, so you could have lunch for an hour and learn something completely new and come up with new innovative ideas for the company. Lunch roulette. If you think lunch roulette is true, just stand up and give me the hands one more time. Don't be shy. Oh, you guys aren't shy at all. Lunch roulette. Stay standing. Let's see. Is it true? It is true. Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Now, of course, many of you just stood up because you thought I couldn't have two falses in a row. Right? Let's be honest. It is true. In fact, here's a screenshot of it, lunch roulette. And the best part of the story is actually the gentleman that started it left. And they didn't sell him the IP, they just gave it to him. And now many companies that I go to, in fact, I was at Novartis not too long ago, and I did this true or false. And everybody stood up, and I couldn't figure out why. It's because they had just got lunch roulette at Novartis. Isn't that great? So why do you care? This is a great example of change doesn't have to be complex. How can you get people to collaborate in very simple ways? People don't want more things on their to-do list. They want it in simple ways. Okay. Here comes our last one. This is your last chance to redeem yourself. If you get all three right, William has told me from Accenture, you get $1 million. Okay, I'm kidding. You don't get $1 million, but you can feel very smart. Here's our last one. Forget 3D printing. The future is 4D printing. 4D printing. This is where smart objects have the ability to assemble themselves. And right now, there is a pilot happening where these objects can assemble themselves in great ways. And the pilot is the US Army, in conjunction with Harvard. They are actually exploring ways to use 4D self-assembling objects to create bridges that can just spring into shape by themselves. If you think it's true, all right, stand up. Either you guys are the most innovative people or you love to stand. If you think it's true, let's see. It is absolutely true. Well done. Well done. So let's talk about 4D. So 4D printing, or 4D objects, right? These are smart objects that can transform themselves over time, depending on what the material is, and in some cases, they can self-assemble. If you are working in manufacturing and product development, you have something physical that you create, this is very interesting because this could change your supply chain and your manufacturing process forever. So let's see how this works. They can be all types of materials. They can be wood, they can be metal, certain kind of polymers. And originally they would be things that could just bend one way or another. But now they can actually self-assemble in very complex ways. So imagine in the future you actually have pieces or materials that are shipped to a location. And it's not people or machines that put them together, it's the materials themselves. Think about what that means for you in terms of shipping costs, production costs, not having to maintain machinery. Let me show you how it works. This is actually the cube right here, and I'll just show you a very quick clip. And in this instance, this is a very simple polymer that's placed in water. This video is sped up by, I think it's 50 times. And watch what happens as it starts to interact with the water. The cube itself is very simple, but it starts to fold up unto itself and assemble into a very specific shape or function, as you can see. So imagine what this means. What could happen if you actually have materials that could just create and come together themselves? This is fascinating. So in the future, something like this could become much more complex. What could happen? Imagine that you have water tubes, for example, that no longer, in our case, crack under the cold. They automatically expand in the heat. They can actually expand and contract to pump water through or get rid of clogs. Maybe you have tennis shoes that actually, when they come in contact with turf, they know that they have to automatically grow cleats. Or if you're playing, in the instance in the United States, basketball, suddenly the area around the ankle becomes reinforced, so it's a safer shoe to play with. These are the things that are happening right now. So what does this mean for you? If you work in production, how or what kind of manufacturing approaches might emerge for you for the products you create? This is so fascinating, right? These are things that aren't just way in the future, they're happening right now. How can you tell things like this when they emerge? I want to show you how change happens. This is how change happens. And what's really interesting about this from a futurist perspective is how change starts and how it ends are never the same. Where a trend starts and where it ends, it's never the same. So for example, when a trend starts, this is how aware you are of something and how many references or think Google hits it gets over time, right? The more Google hits it has, the more aware you are of it. When a trend starts, it's emerging. It's that crazy person that's always coming up with silly ideas at work. It's the guy who's inventing something in the garage. It's the person you would wish would just shut up at meetings sometimes. There's no term for it, there's no investors, it's a crazy brainstorm. It's emerging. And then it's framed. There's an acronym for it, there's investors, there's multiple players, it's starting to take shape. This is when at a cocktail party, somebody mentions something cool and new, and you act like you know about it, right? And then it goes on, then it's on the cover of Time magazine or Sunday Times. It's mainstream, everyone knows about it, you know about it or you act like you do. There's investors, there's players, companies are public. And then finally it's resolved, it's plateaued. This is where there's government regulations, there's lobbyists, people are succeeding or people are going to jail. How is this happening to you right now? Let me give you an example. So let's go back to 2004. Right here on Harvard's campus, there's this thing called FaceMash. It's not called Facebook, it's a dating app, it's not called social media, that term does not exist. Hundreds of people are getting involved, hundreds. Somebody saw this, or they had their son or daughter at school there, they were told about it, they thought it was cool, they went into their boss and they said, "Boss, this is cool, we should get in on this." And the boss said, "Get back to work." And then in 2007, bloggers, avant-garde bloggers like TechCrunch are all of a sudden covering this. There are players and there are antis. And at the time, MySpace was the big social media hit. Facebook was the anti. There's about 300,000 people on it now. And then finally, it's on the cover of Time magazine. This is what I like to say to people. This is the moment when your mom has friended you on Facebook, right? It's over. But this is where it goes. This is where all of a sudden the high courts, or whatever your courts are, they will rule on this, of how people can use data. In fact, this isn't about data at all. This is about your personal use. This is about, in the future, not about regular data, but unstructured data. This is about getting your memories into the cloud. This is about how much are they worth, and who gets them when you die. There are avant-garde insurance companies, financial services brokers, and startups right now that are starting to think about how much will your memories be worth? How will we insure them? And what will it mean when you're gone? That's where it goes. So why do you care? Why do you care? So down here is where you are influencing change. All futurists know this. This is where you can make an impact. And up top, this is where you are taking orders. It's becoming too late. So I want you to think about, where do you play? Where does your company typically play on this line? Now, this is the moment when most people tell me, and we deal with mostly regulated industries, they look at me and they say, but we're different. Insert my industry here, and I can tell you why I'm more regulated than everyone else, and therefore I can't do this. And with all due respect, there are a lot of companies out there in heavily regulated industries that are doing it, and they have the same problems that you do too. So let me give you some examples of how people are actually embracing change and what it means. Because what you have to think about for the future is, frankly, it doesn't matter who you are. You should know who you are. If you run your company, you can articulate who you are. What you need to think about is, who are you becoming? In the next 10 years, who are you becoming, and what does that mean? Because the future is about not just who you're becoming, but who you're going to hire to get there. The race is about human resources. The race is about talent, and I'll tell you why. So let's talk about Shell, and we work with them. Great company. In their words, they have more money than God. Right? They don't have to change if they don't want to. Supply is not the problem, right? Alternative is. So they know that while they could rest on their laurels, they need to change, and they need to do it proactively. Who they're becoming is, they're not a company that's extracting energy but growing it. And what does that mean? It means it's not just about hiring geoscientists, it's about hiring bioscientists, and there are not enough of them to hire. And their biggest competition for them to be able to hire people is what industry? Pharmaceuticals. And then I'm sitting in a meeting in an executive suite not too long ago, and it's at a pharmaceutical company, and their head of HR came in, I kid you not, and they announced that they had just lost their first senior candidate to an oil company. This is where the future is going. Who you think your competition for talent will be is very different depending on who you're becoming. Let's talk about car companies. I know Audi is here today, BMW, I can talk about Ford as well. In the future, we all know, 2050, 70% of the people will live in heavily populated metropolitan areas. They cannot all own cars. There is not the infrastructure for it. And that's why many of the car companies, their biggest partners right now, is in urban settings. It's actually cities themselves. There are 9 cities being built in India right now, 9 cities that will not have roads. They will only have public transportation and areas for walking. And if you're a car company, that might be a little alarming. So you go from becoming a transport to a mobility services company. You're about the destination. Or if you're in publishing, like Macmillan Publishing, a company in the United States, they actually hired a venture capitalist. They hired, gave him $100 million, and said he could only acquire companies that would put them out of business. And what's interesting about this is, these are the kinds of things that they're doing proactively. They know what they need to become, and they're doing it to themselves before somebody does it to them. And the phrase I use for this is, they are practicing proactive obsolescence. They're killing their company. So how do you go about killing your company? And it's not a scary thing, it's actually a very productive thing to do. So what happens at so many places is that there's 2 things at work of why you're not doing what these guys are doing. And it's 2 factors, and I call it, there's too much complexity, it's an excuse. And the second thing is complacency. That's that result of, oh, it's easier just to stick with what we have, right? Let's not rock the boat. And I will tell you that Kill the Company came from a very painful experience that I had. And I was working with a very large manufacturing company, a global conglomerate that you would know very well. And in one of their divisions, their largest division, they had us come in, all my futurists. And they wanted us to do a Picture the Future 2030 session. And we got down there with my team, and I kicked it off. And I was doing a lot of different exercises we do, like picture the future, and from impossible to possible, and reversing assumptions. And I could tell after about an hour that nobody was buying it. You know, as a presenter and a trainer, it is probably one of the most uncomfortable situations you can be in, knowing that you're there and you're going through the motions and really nobody cares. And so we took a break, and I said to one of the senior leaders there, what's going on? And he said, Lisa, it's not that we don't want to change. It's that we really no longer believe that we can affect it. And I thought, well, they're the top 50 in this division. What are the rest of the company going to do? And so it was that moment where I really just wanted to stay in the bathroom and not come out, but I had to. And when we came back from break, I brought everybody in, and I just kind of threw out what we were doing and said, it's that moment of they're either going to love me or they're going to fire me. And I said, here's what we're going to do. I want to rearrange all of you into tables. And I rearranged them into tables of groups by function or by business that they did. So there was rocketry and golf carts, and there was marketing, and there was legal, and because each group has a different competitive set. And I said, I want you to pretend that you're your number one competitor. And so take 10 minutes to figure out who that is. And so legal figured out who that was, and rocketry figured it out. And I said, great. Once they told me who their number one competitors were at each table, I said, now what I want you to do is wear the hat of that competitor. And I want you to kill your company. I want you to turn around and look at your company from an outside perspective and tell me all the things you would do to put yourself out of business. And it was incredible. It was the first time these guys were really engaged, right? Because it's a different way of looking at strategic planning. I was giving them an out-of-company experience where they were forced and mandated to articulate what was wrong, try and get rid of it without any political jargon or issues, and then turn it back on their competition. And what was really interesting is by killing the company, they also killed other things. They killed rules, they killed processes, they got rid of things or people that weren't working, and it gave them the freedom to really identify what had to happen in very simple ways. The whole process took less than 2 hours, and it was much better than any strategic planning that they had done. Now, why is it that you're not doing something like this? Here's the 3 things that I think actually hold you back right now, and the reason why is at your companies you might value the wrong things. And I'm curious if any of these resonate with you. The first thing is, I think in a lot of organizations, we are not leading, we are managing. In fact, in a lot of companies, we are not grooming leaders, we have groomed professional skeptics. These are people that can tell me absolutely what is wrong with something before they can tell me what's right. And it's okay to question things as a leader, but it cannot be the only thing that you do. There will be no innovation or progress with that. The second thing is I think we really believe in process over culture. We love structural change. Behavioral change is much harder. But for the future, we have to look at behavior in order to know what we have to hire. And the final thing is I really think we concentrate too much on the doing over thinking, which is interesting, right? Because execution matters. But I think in a lot of companies right now, thinking differently has become a daring act. Thinking has become a daring act. There is no time for it. And I sit on a board, actually an advisory board at 3M. And I sit with a lot of very patented scientists. And what's so ironic, I think, at 3M is that they don't think they're very innovative. This group didn't think they were innovative, and I found that shocking. These people have many patents to their names. They've done incredible things. And yet they just didn't feel like they were being that innovative. And they realized they just felt like they didn't have time to think anymore. And we went to dinner, and over cocktails, I was talking to one of the neuroscientists. I really like neurology and cognitive behavior. And I mentioned to one of the neurologists that I thought thinking had become a daring act. And he said, Lisa, you know, the funny thing is that the brain is the most amazing organ that we have. It's the most amazing organ. It starts working from the very second that you wake up in the morning, and it doesn't stop until the very moment that you set foot into your office. So there's a lot of science around thinking, particularly creative thinking. And we know, this was a study actually early in the 80s that started with Synectics and has since grown with other companies. We know that people, when they get together, they typically are thinking in 3 different patterns. 3 different ways. So this is a great group. I'm sure at any one time you all are thinking in one of 3 ways right now, and I'd like to hear which one it is, just by show of hands. So let me tell you what these 3 ways are. A certain group of you right now, in fact, 18% of you in this room are laser focused on what I'm saying. Raise your hand if you're focused on what I'm saying. Okay, that's more than 18%, but I like you guys. Okay, the second group of you in this room right now, and that's about 25% of you, are having an unrelated thought or a sexual fantasy. Don't raise your hands, okay? It's being filmed, it's inappropriate. Okay, and the last group of you, which of course is gonna be the majority of you, 57% are doing something called on-demand thinking, and in-and-out thinking. I'm talking, you're thinking about your email, you've got that meeting, oh my God, I forgot to do this one thing, she's talking, she's boring, sexual fantasy, you engage, and then I'm boring again. Now, that's funny, but this is the reality of leaders that you have to think about. This is how you are at work, and more importantly, this is how the people are that work for you. They think on demand. So if you're going to tell them to change, don't give them some complex 12-step program. Give them simple things they can do while they're in those meetings and emails to start creating change. Otherwise, they will not do it. They will not do it. So let me tell you about some ways to change. And the story of change that I have, that it actually comes from my book, was with a very large bank downtown. And they came to us and they said, we have had so many bad change initiatives. Come help us come up with something new and develop it with us. And we did. And we actually elected 12 people to this, we called a provocateur board. And these 12 people were nominated by others, and they took a survey. And it originally started with more people, but the 12 that we chose, and this is very important to think about, they weren't the people that were the most innovative. They were the people that actually admitted they might be a little resistant to change. And that's very important, because too often when you do a change initiative, you elect the people that are the most avant-garde, right? The biggest risk takers. But those are the people that a lot of people in your company look at and go, ooh, that's not me. I can't be them. You want people that people can identify with. So we chose people that were a little resistant to change. And it turned out to be an incredible thing. And we got them together and we said, we're going to create a bunch of tools and change program over 8 weeks. Some of them were going to be horrible, and they were. And some of them were going to be great, and I'll share them with you. But the first thing we had to do was have people realize that if you're going to really lead change, you're going to stick out, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable. So we got them all in cabs, and we were down on Wall Street, and we brought them all to Grand Central, which is where this is. And this is very silly, but it was illustrative of what happened. We gave the group of people, a subset of them, journals, and they stood all around the rotunda in Grand Central, and they were going to capture in writing what was about to happen next. Another smaller group, we gave wigs. Crazy, stupid wigs, bozo wig, all this other stuff. And what we did is we set them loose and we made them walk around Grand Central wearing these wigs, and just to see the reaction from people and what it was like to stand out. Of the people we gave wigs, 4 of them loved it. One of them, right here, Brian, absolutely hated this and wanted to walk out. But what was interesting is the first 4 people went around the rotunda, they came back, they were uncomfortable, but they laughed and they said it was really fun. Brian here went around, and suddenly he disappeared. We didn't know where he went. We finally found him. He had wandered off. He was having so much fun. He was going around the larger part of Grand Central, just having everybody look at him in his wig. And so after he had gone around about 3 times, we brought him back downstairs, and we said, what was it like? And he said, it was very uncomfortable, but finally I realized nobody cared. And I said, of course, it's New York. Of course nobody cares, right? And he said, what was really interesting about that is I realized if I'm going to be a signal for change, I'm going to stand out, but it's not as bad as you think. And so we set off on 8 weeks, and we came up with a lot of different tools. And what I want to do is I want to share some of these tools now and what we learned about change. And here was the key takeaway from this 8-week program. And it's not what you think. Change to me happens in 3 ways. The first thing is you can't put it on people. You have to create it with them. The people that are going to really activate the change have to feel vested in it. They don't want to be told necessarily what to do. The second thing is to make it stick. I think change has to be supported from the top down, of course. But where it happens is from the middle out. The people that are sitting in those meetings and emails every day slogging through, they have to be invested in the process. And then finally, the last thing is don't make it complex, make it very simple to start the change. It must be simple. So if it takes too long, in my opinion, to learn something, we design everything to be 30 minutes or less, then you have a problem. So let's start by looking at simplicity. And I want to talk about some rules and tools for change. I promise you that you will use one of these, and I'd be curious if you come up to me after which one you'll do. So let's do something simple to warm our brains up, because we've had a lot of thinking here. How many people here are good at math? Raise your hands. Okay. How many people can add 2 numbers together? Okay, almost everybody, apparently. What we're going to do is we're going to do some math out loud together, because I want to get you up here in your frontal cortex, just to wake you up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say some numbers, and as we say them together out loud, you'll add them up. So if I said 2, you would yell 2. And if I said 2 again, you would add it up and yell out. You guys can do this. I'll start with you, and then I'll fade to the background. But you have to say it together out loud. Everybody ready? Here we go. I'll start with you. First number, out loud, 1,000. Let's add it up. 1,000 and? Good. Next? Good? Great. Good? Again? And finally. You said these people were very smart. Should we do it again? Okay, 5,000. Every time I do it, 5,000. It's really fun when I hear the occasional 6,000. What happened? What happened? This is an example of what makes you very good as a leader can make you very bad as an innovator. You are taught to find the shortcut, to recognize patterns, and to get to the answer fast. And so we all marched together right off the cliff. So you have pattern recognition, right? You think, you assume, you get lost in your assumptions. And this is what makes you fall for the wrong things. You don't question your assumptions. Who typically gets this right when I do this? What type of person? Not accountants, no. Children up to age 10 or 11. Typically before, at least, and I know a lot of Western areas, before standardized testing happens, because children look at individual pieces of information and they question it. And as we get older, we look at things in terms of true or false, right or wrong, multiple choice. And those gray areas are very important for us to remember. We have to question our assumptions. So let's do that. One of the first things I want to talk about is asking better questions. If you want better answers, ask better questions. One of the things that we came up with in this case study with this bank is we came up with over 170 killer questions to have a better way of getting at product development. And let me give you an example. Here's the problem, right? Usually this is what you do when you get into a room. Come on. Who's got a creative epiphany? That's hard to do. In the future, what you need to think about is asking questions is going to be more valuable than finding answers. Remember this. In the future, asking the right questions will be more valuable than finding the right answers. Here's why. Google is not a search engine. It is an answer engine. If a child here wants to find out for Nelson Mandela's birthday, what it used to be like 10 years ago is you would go online and it would present to you several links of where you could go to find that information. Now, it gives it to you. It is an answer engine, and it's going to get smarter and smarter. So it's not about the data. The data's there. It's, do you know the right question asked to get the right data? So here's how you're going to do it. You need to start thinking in terms of creative questions. So rather than something like this, who's got an idea about? Or how should we improve? Those are terrible questions. What if you did this to provoke thinking? Here's one. If we had to give away our current products or services for free, we could not charge for them, how else could we make money? Or what about this one? What question would you love to ask our customers or our employees, but you are too scared or embarrassed to ask? Or finally, this one. You've just written a tell-all book about the organization. What secrets would it reveal? So I want you to think about, if you left here today, what is the one question you would love to ask? And why haven't you asked it? And here's the next one. And I'm going to tell it with a little story, but I have a feeling this is going to be your favorite way to go about change. So the story is best illustrated like this. There was a scientist, and he had 10 monkeys in a cage. And he decided that he would put a banana on top of the cage. And the first monkey that would get the banana would get to eat the banana, and he would douse all the other monkeys in the cage with water. First day, he puts a banana on top of the cage. One monkey climbs up and gets it. All the other monkeys are sprayed with water, and they're very mad. Next day, he does the same thing. He puts a banana on top. Monkeys climb up. Another monkey gets it. He eats the banana. All the other monkeys get water poured on them. They're very mad. By the end of the week, the monkeys know, don't go for the banana. And so the scientist said, you know what? I'm going to change this a little bit. Each week, I'm going to replace one of the monkeys with a new monkey. And so the next week, he puts a new monkey in the cage, takes an old monkey out. Sure enough, what's the first thing that monkey does? Goes for the banana. All the monkeys pull him down. By the end of the week, that monkey knows, whoa, don't go for the banana. And at the end of 10 weeks, there are 10 new monkeys in the cage. None of them go for the banana. None of them know why. What's interesting about this is what happens at work. Whether it's with you or your employees, we do not question things because we say, that's how we've always done it. What's a rule? It must be there for a reason. Maybe those rules have outlived their time. And so one of the most popular things that we teach is something called kill a stupid rule. And it was something that was actually started at what was Commerce Bank, now as TD Bank in Canada. And the idea was, as you get bigger and more complex, you put more things in place, remember? Well, some of those things are good, but maybe they've outlived their time, and we don't question them enough. So what you do is you get your team together and you say, if you could kill any rules that hold us back from innovating, what would they be and why? What would they be and why? And I will tell you, if you give them 15 minutes to do that, when 15 minutes is up, they will want more time. After another, say, 15 minutes, they will come up with literally hundreds of rules. There'll be quick wins, there'll be things you didn't expect. They'll be your stupid rules, by the way, that you came up with. Some of them aren't even rules. They're cultural assumptions, they're norms. They're things and rules that have even outlived their time. I've seen many times with executives where they've stood up and they see all the rules that people come up with, and they start addressing these rules, and they say, who said this was a rule? This was gone a long time ago. We don't even communicate that things have changed. So I want you to think about this when you leave here. Right? If you could kill any 2 rules at work that are holding you back, what would they be and why? The last thing I'll tell you is something that I think you're going to start to see a change on, and I think this is important. I think this is a structural change that has to happen, and I think you need to make simplicity a habit. We are creatures of habit. We like to fall into our old traps because it's familiar, but no change will happen unless you make it a habit. I think you're going to start to see the advent of, at the C-suite level, less about functional roles, CFO, CMO. I think you're going to start to see behavioral or skill-based roles, such as the Chief Simplicity Officer. This is somebody who is not just about efficiency like a COO. Of course, they will actually look between and beyond the organization to come up with best practices, share them with everyone else, say the rules that others are killing, the processes that they're getting rid of, and make it more efficient. But their big thing is that they will be about retention. Because if we don't get the work right, we won't get the culture right, period. If you don't get the work right, you don't get the culture right. And these are the people that will be in charge of getting people more skilled to think differently and actually retaining better talent because it's a simpler, better place to work with more meaning. So I'm going to leave you with this. And I started talking about change as a challenge. But the reality for everybody here is that change is a choice. You do not have to do it. You don't have to do it. But I think we're better off because we could sit here all day long and we could say to ourselves with lots of excuses of why things can't happen. Regulations, our teams, our employees, we don't have the right things in place. But I think you'd be better served to ask yourself, what assumptions do you have that are holding you back from doing things, and have those assumptions outlive their time? What are rules that you could kill right now to make life simpler or work simpler, and why haven't you killed them? Change is a choice. And I think some of the things here today will make it easier for you to do it. And I think change begins with you. So I want to say thank you very much, and I hope you have a great conference. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.